who are not here on the session right now and are viewing our recording. So we're going to cover the last topic that we have included in your um, problem set, and that would be categorical syllogism. So to sum up what's covered on your problem set, we have the introduction concepts or introductory concepts to logic. We have the table of values and constructing table of values and finding out truth values for compound proposition. We also have um, the topics under tautologies, fallacies, and categorical propositions, no, and categorical syllogisms that will be covered in your exam. However, there's a little bit of the last few topics so that you won't be too overwhelmed with what we have for this problem set. And then also on the succeeding week, the same concepts that are part of your problem set will be the same topics that we'll have for your long test. So that would be your long one of the major assessments, no, under the written work that will be computed under written work, and that's your long test number 3. So right after this problem set and long test, you'll have one more, which is the major assessments, but the only coverage for that would be what we're going to be discussing on the last 1 or 2 weeks that we have now prior to the end of the semester. Okay, so I hope you were able to see the reviewers that I have provided to you as well, and a number of modules, no, that could help you with regards to the topics under simple propositions, compound propositions, constructing table of values, and then about tautologies and fallacies. So right after this session, I'm also going to provide you a copy, no, of the module and reviewer for categorical syllogism. Okay, so without further ado, no, let's start with our topic for today. Okay, so for this morning, we're going to cover, for this afternoon, we're going to cover categorical syllogisms. Okay, well, we will have a few more people not trickling in the session, but ayan, since it's recorded already, let's start now with our topic. Okay, so in this day and age where pieces of information, no, can travel around the world and you could get it as easily as a touch of the button, no, or a quick search on your browser. Okay, you could have any information that you want, and it's important for you, dear students, no, to be critical in identifying whether the given statements are true or false. Hence, that's why we've covered first, no, tautologies, contradictions, and even fallacies for you to look into certain arguments and check whether the reasoning is correct or incorrect. So you could refer to the different fallacies that we've initially discussed, no, to tell whether a certain argument is valid or not. So we're going to continue with that thing or thinking in mind, no. So we're going to check whether certain statements or a set of statements could be valid or invalid. Okay, so you need to be wise in dealing with information that you encounter every day. For example, ayan. So in social media, you usually encounter, no, this is very timely right now since it's the start or it's in the campaign season. No? So you might hear some supporters, no, from some politicians. So let's call them politician A and politician B. So some people will say all supporters of politician A is not a supporter of politician B. You could also hear some statements, no, that all supporters of the project of politician A must be a supporter of politician A also, no, or all supporters of the project of politician A must be a supporter of politician A in that sense. Okay. Also, aside from politics, you could also hear some statements, now with regards to other things that you could see here in the television and even in the internet. Like for advertisements, you could hear statements like everyone who drinks this is a champion. Okay. Or all users of our product are real men. Okay, so those claims or statements could be either considered a valid or invalid statement, or we could check their validity or falsity. So this is an attempt for those advertisements, no, to encourage the buyers to purchase the product. So with their statement, even if those are valid or not, that's an attempt to encourage more buyers. Okay, and then lastly, you will also hear some information, no, like statements like all Filipinos are hardworking, or all Filipinos are latecomers. So these kinds of statements must be analyzed carefully whether it is true or not. So in this discussion that we'll have for this afternoon, we'll learn how to construct and analyze categorical syllogisms and how to establish the validity and falsity of these categorical syllogisms. And we're going to do that by covering first, no, and discussing what we have set out for this afternoon. So our objectives at the end of our discussion this afternoon is that you'll understand what are standard categorical syllogisms, describe categorical syllogisms, and paraphrase them into categorical sentences. Also, no, even if it's a quick discussion on this, we're also going to cover the reduction of the number of terms that you'll have with syllogisms. And then finally, our goal in mind is to establish validity and falsity of certain arguments. Okay, so to start with our lesson, no, okay, about standard categorical syllogisms, let's have this first activity. So I'm going to call this what's your favorite. Okay, so using the templates that we have here, no, okay, so we have the statement all blank are blank, no blank are blank, some blanks are blank, or some blanks are no or not blanks. Okay, so let's uh, rewrite this as not blanks. Okay, so you're going to fill in the first blank as an animal of your choice. Okay, so we're going to fill in the first blank as an animal of your choice, or maybe your favorite animal, and the second blank as something that you could describe, no, the animal that you like. Okay, so I'm going to use the chat box to type in my answer. So I have two cats, so I'm going to type in all cats are naughty. Okay, there we go. So I want to hear your thoughts and descriptions, no, for your um, cats. So maybe 1 to 2 minutes for you to type in your favorite animals and your specific descriptions for them. No, we also have an example there. All dogs are adorable. Okay, you could also use multiple templates that we have there. No, like for me, I've used all blank are blank. Ayan, si Karil, no? Sabi niya, all tigers are wild. Okay. So how about the others? Let's see. Favorite pet yata or favorite animal ni Karil ang tiger. How about the others? Okay, let's see. Ayan, si Jericho, sabi ni Jericho, mabangis. Anyway, I want your answers, no, Jericho. Let's have there, oh, sabi ni Dominic, all dogs are loyal. So, ginaya niya. Instead of adorable, all dogs are loyal. All pandas are lazy. All cats are clingy. Take note, that's one of my examples, no? Let's see what are your other opinions by using the other templates. Ayan, all bees are busy. So, you're very intent, no, on using the all blank and blank template. How about some other opinions using the other templates? So, sige. Um, yeah. I'll use another one. Some cats are not, ayan, lazy. Ayan natin. Because my cats are very unruly. No? So, using the same template or maybe the same animal but a different description now, no, I now have the statement some cats are lazy, and this will be quite different from what I've initially given, no, that all cats are naughty. Using the same word and using the same animal, no, I could also say that some cats are not naughty. Okay, so this also again changed the previous statements that or previous statement that I've had that all cats are lazy. Okay, so there you have it now. So the activity that we've done earlier, ayan, no, stating the different statements that we have for your favorite animals, are called categorical propositions. So not just the template all blank or blank could be considered a categorical proposition, but all of the templates there, once filled out with your favorite animal and your specific description about that animal, could be considered as categorical propositions. So in order for us to come up with a statement, we need to associate a group of people, animals, or objects with a shared characteristics or shared characteristic. So the animal and the characteristic that we have is called a class. Okay, so when you have those two, you have classes. For example, the statement, all Filipinos are hardworking, have two class, no? The first one is the class of Filipinos, while the second one is the class of hardworking people. So the combination of these two or the proposition made by these two classes is called a categorical proposition. Clearly defined, we have there the definition for class and categorical proposition respectively. So for class, it's a collection of objects that have some specified characteristic in it. While a categorical proposition are propositions that state relationship between two classes. For example, what we have here, no? Okay, so all Filipinos are hardworking, have two classes, the class for Filipinos and the hardworking people. Okay, so aside from the classes, categorical propositions may assert or deny that some part of your class S, okay, called the subject, is included in another class P called the predicate, either partially or wholly. So in a sense, you could change some of the words, no, just like what we have with our template, to denote that one member or a member of your first class is either wholly or partially a member of your second class, which is denoted here by S and P, or the subject and the predicate. So if we are given here now with all Filipinos are hardworking, aside from all Filipinos being a class, all Filipinos there is considered as a subject of your statement, while hardworking, or in a sense the hardworking people, is now your predicate. So aside from having two class like the class of Filipinos and the class of hardworking people, we also have the subject here as Filipinos and hardworking people P as your predicate. Okay, so also now the words that we use there to combine the classes, the subject and predicate will tell whether one class asserts a denial, a partial, or a whole inclusion of those two different classes. Furthermore, ayan no, a proposition made between two classes, given your subject and predicate, could be written into three different ways. So what are those? So the first one, okay, this one shows that all members of one class S are included in the other class P. Okay, also, ayan no, the second one, some but not all members of one class are included in another class P. Okay. And then lastly, no member of one class S is a member or included, no, in the other class P. So you need to take note of either it will be partially or wholly included in your two classes. So either members of the subject will be included in the class of your predicate. Okay, so those will be certain factors, no, that we need to take into consideration when we're identifying different categorical propositions. Okay. So moving forward, we could now categorize, no, different propositions based on it asserts or denies the inclusion of one class to the other, or either the inclusion of it partially or wholly in a sense. So we could have four different kinds of categorical propositions in standard form, and we name it by using a letter, no? So initially meron na tayong S for subject, P for predicate. So now we're going to use other letters, no, to denote our proposition. So the first kind or standard form, no, of a categorical proposition wherein it could take form into is called the universal affirmative proposition, also called the A propositions. So this kind of proposition asserts. Okay, so positive siya, no? It asserts. It does not deny. So it asserts that all members of whole one class is included or contained in the other class. So as you can see there, no, with our Venn diagram there showing you the universal um, set, and then the set for all the subject and the set for all your predicate. So if we have there a specific member denoted by our variable there x, so this means that x of class S belongs to class B kasi nandun na siya sa loob ni class S, nandun din siya sa loob ni class B, or it's wholly included in your subject and also in your predicate. So it takes the form all S is P for this kind of proposition. Okay, so we call this as the A proposition. So as statement for that example, no, for the A proposition. Okay, so how does the A proposition is written in a given statement? So let me give you one example. The statement all triangles are polygons is an example of an A proposition. So notice all triangles are polygons. So you could interchange, no, the use of is or are depending upon the um, if it's singular or plural in nature. So in this case, all triangles are polygons is in a proposition. So your subject is the triangles while your predicate is that your triangles are polygons. Okay, so moving forward, let's now have another kind of categorical proposition in the form of your universal negative. Okay, so your universal negative now carries the form no S is P, and we call it as E proposition. So this kind of proposition denies. So earlier it asserts, now it denies that any member of one class is included on the other class. So notice that we have the two circles there. The member denoted by X there cannot be included in the predicate or was not included in the predicate. So no member of S is a member of P. So this means that any member of X of class S does not belong to P. So E propositions are usually written as no S is P or no S or P for that matter. Now, for example, no circle is a polygon. Okay, so that's a statement showing an E proposition. So no circle is a polygon. Okay, so that's your A proposition. Next is your E proposition. We still have two more. So earlier, we have the assertion or denial of the inclusion of your given member of your subject to the predicate, be it be it assertion or denial as a whole. Okay, so we'll have another set which is still assertion or denial but in a particular sense naman. So for our third kind of proposition, okay, so we call it as particular affirmative. So earlier, ayan, universal negative and universal affirmative. So now it's a bit more specific, no? So a particular member of your subject will now be part of your predicate as well. So this kind of proposition, which we call as I proposition, no, affirms that some members of one class are included in the other. So this means that there exists at least one member of it, okay, of class S that is a member of class P, as compared to our universal affirmative proposition earlier where all members of class S is a member of class P. Now here, no, notice that only some part of S touches some part of P. So this is called I proposition, and it's usually in the form some S is P. For example, the statement some parallelograms are rectangles are called or in the form I proposition. So some S is P. Okay. Some parallelograms are rectangles. Okay. Lastly, if there is a particular affirmative proposition, we also have a particular negative proposition. So it's now in the form some S is not P, and we call it as O proposition. So this kind of proposition now states that, ayan, this proposition denies naman that some members of one class are included in the other class. So this means that there exists at least one member of X, so let's say we have X there, no, of class S that does not belong to class P. Usually, some propositions, no, or O propositions, just like this one, okay, carries the form some S is not P. For example, some triangles are not equilateral. So there are different kinds of triangles. So some triangles are not equilateral. So we call them as O proposition. So to sum it up a bit, we have four kinds. Your universal affirmative proposition A, universal negative proposition E. Okay. Next is particular affirmative proposition I, and then last is particular negative proposition O. So with those different kinds of propositions now, we could now define what is a categorical proposition. So categorical propositions are used to expand reasoning, and if you have two categorical propositions now, we could use one as the premise and another one as a conclusion. So if you have this combination of the premise and the conclusion, you'll now have what we call as a categorical syllogism. Clearly defined, a syllogism is a deductive argument in which a conclusion is inferred from two premises. So here you have three statements, no? First and second premise, and then your conclusion. Okay, for categorical syllogism, it is a syllogism consisting of three categorical propositions containing exactly three classes. So may tatlong classes lang siya. Each of these classes must occur in exactly two propositions. So may mga ano tayo, may mga conditions tayo for you to have a categorical syllogism, no? So again, to emphasize what is a categorical syllogism, it should have exactly three classes. Okay, three of these classes must occur in two of your given propositions. Okay, we could also rewrite, no? We could also rewrite your categorical syllogism containing your three statements and your three classes, okay, into its standard form. Okay, so you could now have the previous propositions A, E, I, O as the forms, no, that will be followed by your premises and your conclusion. Okay, so let's now go through the different parts of the standard form of a categorical syllogism. Okay, so consider the categorical syllogism below given by the statements: all rectangles have four right angles. Some parallelograms are rectangles. Therefore, some parallelograms have four right angles. So notice, no, we have three statements there, and we have the different terms, no, that we have there. So before we go through the specific parts like the terms that we have and the classes, let us now use first this categorical syllogism that we have. So it is important for you to identify the terms of your syllogism in order for you to determine the parts of the standard form. In the case that we have here, no, we have three terms. Ano yung terms na meron tayo? The first one is the term for rectangles. Okay, so it occurs on one of your statement and also on your other statement, no? Rectangles, rectangles. Another class or another term that we could have here is the term for right angles. Okay, so notice, no, your four right angles exist there, and it also exists here in your last statement. Then also we also have the term parallelograms, which occurs here and here as well. Okay, so the term that appears as the predicate of the conclusion is four right angles. So we focus, no, on the conclusion kasi it is stated here, no. Therefore, so nag-conclude ka na that your predicate is your four right angles, while your subject now for your conclusion is the term parallelograms. So in this case, ayan, we could now differentiate the terms that we have there. So the term that appears as the predicate of the conclusion, which is four right angles, is called your major term. So aside from this being the predicate, this term here is called the major term. Okay. So yan yung major term mo. While the term that appears as the subject of your conclusion, which is parallelograms that we have there, is now considered as the minor term of the syllogism. So meron tayong major and minor terms in your syllogism, no? Okay. So the third term of the syllogism, which does not appear, no, in your conclusion, is now called the middle term. So in this case, that the middle term, no, that does not occur in our conclusion is the word rectangle. So ito yung ating middle term. Okay. So the terms that you have in your syllogism, no, same rectangles and rectangles, will have an effect, no, on how you're going to lay out your the different forms later of the categorical syllogisms that you've had, and it will also be helpful in finding out the validity and falsity of your given categorical syllogism. So first, let's define, no, your major, minor, and middle term. So here, your major term is the term that appears as the predicate of the conclusion if it's written in the standard form of a categorical syllogism. Next, your minor term naman is the subject of your conclusion if it's still in standard form of categorical syllogism, while the term that does not appear, no, in your conclusion is called the middle term. So those are the three terms that we have, no, for your categorical syllogism. Okay. So there are also no, terms of your syllogism like the four right angles and the parallelogram. So the major term of the syllogism is four right angles as we've seen earlier. Then the categorical proposition that contains, no, the four right angles is what we call now as a major premise. A major premise defined is the premise that contains the middle term, while the minor premise is the premise that contains the minor term. Okay, so the categorical proposition now that contains the term parallelogram is now called your minor premise. Okay, in our example earlier, no, it follows the form, ayan. If it's in standard form, the proposition should be arranged in this order. The major premise first, and then the minor premise, and then the conclusion. Okay, so major premise, minor premise, and then conclusion. So you need to clearly identify, no, the terms that we had. So let me just go through this again. So the major premise contains the major premise contains the major term. So anong major term natin? Four right angles. Therefore, this is your major premise. While our minor term, which is parallelogram, is contained on the second statement, making this now our minor premise. Okay, so that's how you differentiate, because this last one is called our conclusion. No? Okay, so your conclusion contains your minor term, major term, that will tell you which would be your major premise and minor premise respectively. Okay, so going back to the differentiation, no? Sige, let's have this one real world problem to uh, have us be more um, in-depth, and so that we could learn more, no, about the major premise, major terms, minor premise, and minor terms, and even the conclusions that you have in your given statement. So in this given word problem, we have Eli. So Eli watched an advertisement about toothpaste. In their advertisement, the following syllogism is mentioned. So based from the advertisement, the statement that we have there for the first statement is all users of Smile toothpaste have pearly white teeth. The second statement shows you that some Filipinos have used Smile toothpaste already. So what we need to do here is to construct a Venn diagram for the following categorical syllogism and then write a possible conclusion since we only have one, two terms or sorry, one and two statements that we have here. Okay. So to solve this one, let us let S be our ayan, be our subject Filipinos, and P our pearly white teeth, and M be our smile toothpaste. So we have now the subject, the predicate, and your middle term M. Also, notice no that your first statement, let me just go back to that one. The statement all users of smile toothpaste have pearly white teeth is considered as your A proposition. So all users are blank. Okay, or all blanks are blank, while your minor premise stated there that we have the statement some Filipinos have used mild toothpaste already is now in the form I. So meron tayong A, I propositions respectively for your major and minor premise. For your terms naman, we have S as Filipinos, P as pearly white teeth, your predicate, and M which is your smile toothpaste. So notice no, M is occurring in both your major and minor premises. Thus, we can have the premises reduced in the form all M are P and we have also some S are M. Okay, so in order for us to visualize the Venn diagrams clearly, we could draw them separately at first. So with our statement there, all MRP, so we have there the given Venn diagram no, that supports our statement. On the other hand, the statement some SRM could now be drawn in this kind of Venn diagram. So we have there a specific member S which is a member of M, which is still a member of P as well. While you have here the member X still, which is, ayan, some members of X are members of M. So finally, combining the two together, we'll now have this kind of diagram. Okay. So observe here now no yung relationship ni S and P in our proposition. So we could denote no. So if we're just going to focus on S and P and disregard M there. Okay, so let me just use another color. Let's see, yan, green naman. So notice the relationship of S and P here. We have S here, which is one of your class, and we have your P there. Okay, so it follows in this form, no? So sum S R P. Okay, so sum S, you have your X there, sum S R P. Therefore, we could now use that as our conclusion, no? So observe that the relationship that we have for S and P follows that form. So yung ganitong form natin with the Venn diagrams. And looking back at the Venn diagrams that we have earlier, this shows you that, ayan, no? It could be similar to an I proposition which has the form some S R P. Okay, so we could also have that as some S R not P, but we'll just use no some S R P. Okay, so from there we could have a possible conclusion from your syllogism denoted by our statement some Filipinos there no which is your S have pearly white teeth which is your P. So some Filipinos have pearly white teeth could be a possible conclusion for our first given major and minor premise. Okay. So before we move to the next session, do you have any questions? Any questions ba? We still have to cover a few more, no? So I'm going to be a bit faster. Okay, so yeah. Since wala nang questions, let me move to the next part of the lesson, which is paraphrasing categorical sentences. So you could also paraphrase no, different categorical sentences so that you could have it in standard form. Okay. So an important part of this is the quality of your categorical proposition and the quantity that you have for your categorical proposition. So take note that all standard form of your categorical propositions either affirms or denies. Okay, so may affirmation or may denial tayo, no? That's why we have the affirmative and the negative kinds of proposition. So if you're affirming or denying your categorical proposition, so it denotes the quality of the categorical proposition. So the quality is an attribute of a categorical proposition, and it's determined by either being affirmed or denied by the proposition. While your quantity naman, ayan, no? So some cats are wild are also affirmative. All dogs are adorable is still affirmative. However, the statement no wolves are domesticated and some people are not friendly are now negative. So may affirmative and negative tayo. Okay. So the terms that affirms, no, and denies our proposition could still be defined by either our A, E, I, or O proposition. So some of them wholly affirms, some of them wholly denies, or some of them particularly affirms, or some of them particularly denies. Okay, so aside from the quality, we also have the quantity of your categorical proposition. The quantity now is an attribute of your proposition determined by checking whether the proposition refers to all members of the class or to some members of the class. So if the proposition contains or refers, no, all members, like all models are tall or no dogs are vicious, so this denotes the universality or being a universal in quantity. However, if you have now the word some blanks are blank, for example, some people are friendly or some teachers are not strict, the word some there, no, denotes naman again still the quantity of your given proposition. So it's now, instead of universality or being universal, you're now being particular naman with your proposition. So in writing your standard form of the proposition, ayan, it is important to know the quality and quantity of your given propositions in your classes to preserve your accuracy. So in changing it to standard form, it could follow, no, the form quantifier, subject term, copula, and then your predicate term. So usually all, subject term, is or are, and then your predicate term. For example, ayan, no, we'll have the following English statements. Ayan. A few SRP could be written in the standard form some SRP. Also, few SRP could be rewritten as some SRP or some SR not P. Okay. Also, we have there not every S is a P could be rewritten as some S are not P, or not all S are P could be rewritten as some S are not P also. So if you encounter some of these words, you could check, no, the table that we have here whether they will be in some S are not P form or some SRP form. So depending upon your quantifiers and then your given subject and predicate, you will now have its standard form. So you'll only left here with two possible standard forms, no? Some SRP or some SR not P for your given standard form. So even if you have different quantifiers, it all boils down to it being a particular affirmative or a particular negative. Let's move to the other English sentences. Okay, so the English sentence, not an S is a P, is still no S or P. So ngayon naman, may universal negative tayo, no? Okay, the statement, if it is an S, then it is a P, denotes, ayan, universal affirmative in the form all S are P. Okay, if it is a P, if it is, it is a P if it is an S, is still in the form all S are P. On the other hand, only S are P is written in the form all of your predicates are your subject. So, pwede rin magkabaliktad, no? Yung subject and predicate mo in your standard form, denoted here by all PRS, all PRS, and all PRS for only SRP, none except SRP, or none but SRP follows this form. Etong tatlong to. So there's a change, no, in your subject, and predicate's position. Also, the only SRP is still in the standard form, all SRP. Okay. So going to the last kind, ayan, we now have all except SRP could be rewritten in the form no SRP or all non-SRP, or the last statement, all but SRP could be rewritten in the form no SRP or all non-SRP. In your given module and reviewer, you will have multiple examples of this one, no? So you could go through those for you to see the different examples that we had. Okay, so let me just go through the next parts, and that would be the mood now of your categorical syllogism. So the mood is the characterization of a categorical syllogism thing aban and determined by the forms of the premises and the conclusion written in standard or categorical form. So if you have certain statements that follow the previous English sentences that we have, no, it is a bit important, or it's somewhat imperative for you to rewrite it in standard form so that you would clearly see and identify the mood of your categorical proposition. Okay. So to illustrate the mood of our given categorical syllogism, no, let's have this given example. So in our example, some prime numbers are counting numbers divisible by 2. The second statement, all counting numbers divisible by 2 are even numbers. For our conclusion, therefore, some even numbers are prime numbers. So here, the mood of the syllogism is in standard form, denoted by the three letters corresponding the kind of categorical proposition contained in the major, minor premises and your conclusion. So looking now at how our statements are laid out, we now have there the statement some prime numbers are counting numbers is in the I proposition form or I proposition form. While our minor premise, all counting numbers are divisible by 2, all counting numbers divisible by 2 or even numbers, follows now the A proposition form. Please excuse me, no, for the background noise. Ayan. Anyways, ayan, moving forward with the third statement, we now have the conclusion which follows the form. Some even numbers are prime numbers is also again, no, in the I proposition form, giving now our mood as IAI. Take note, this is very important, no? Because the mood of our categorical proposition together um, with another particular concept that we're going to apply now together with the mood will tell you the validity or falsity of your given statement. So aside from going through certain rules to check the validity and falsity, one quick way to identify if your categorical proposition is valid or false is through finding out the mood first and then the next concept. Okay, so here, no, it is written in the IAI mood. Okay, so what is the next concept that we need to check, no, in terms of our categorical proposition? So aside from the mood, we also need to check the figure of your categorical proposition. So ano naman si figure? So the figure is a characterization of your categorical syllogism which is determined by the position of your middle term in the premises on the standard form of your categorical proposition. So kaya ko binigay muna ways on how to rewrite or how to translate your given statements or English sentences into standard form so that when we go through finding out the mood and figure of your categorical proposition, it is already in standard form. Okay, so aside from the mood, the figure now is very important in finding out the validity and falsity of your categorical syllogism. So ano yung mga different figures na meron tayo? So the first figure denoted by figure 1 or denoted by the number 1 have the middle term of the subject of the major premise and the predicate of the minor premise. Looking here, no, in the form all M are P and some SRP. So notice on your major premise, the middle term is the subject, while for your minor premise, the middle term is your predicate. So ito yung isa sa mga kailangan nyo i-look into, no, sa inyong um, pag-identify ng validity of falsity or falsity ng categorical syllogism. If M or the middle term follows this kind of figure, that's figure 1. Okay, so next, let's move to figure 2. Sa figure 2 naman, the middle term is the predicate of both the major and minor premises, giving you now with the statement all P are M, and like this one, no SRP, no SRM, shows you that the middle term is the predicate of both your major and minor premise. So laging namang mauuna si major premise bago kay minor premise, and then you have your conclusion. So notice that it is both the predicate of your major and minor premise. Okay, so that's figure number 2. Okay. Next, for figure number 3, the middle term now is the subject of both the major and minor premise. So as compared with figure 2, which is it's the predicate now, okay, no? Figure 3, the middle term now is your ayan, the middle term now is your subject for both major and minor premise. And then lastly, for our fourth kind, no, of figure, we now have the middle term now, which is the opposite of figure 1. The middle term now is the predicate of the major premise and now the subject of our minor premise. So earlier nandito si M for figure 1 and nandito si M or middle term for figure 1 also. But now it's interchanged, no? It is now the predicate of your major premise and the subject of your minor premise, giving you now with figure 4. So all in all, we have 4 moods, okay, denoted by um, okay, we have 4 moods. Let's go back to, sorry, not 4 moods. We have 4 figures and we have different combinations, no, for the moods of your categorical syllogism. So there are multiple moods for your categorical syllogism depending upon the forms that your major minor premise will take. So pwede yung, since we have 4 kinds of propositions A, E, I, O. Okay, so this could be A, A, A. This could be A, E, O, I, O, A. So depending upon the um, form, no, that it will take based on your types of propositions given for your major and minor premise, you'll now have the mood for your categorical syllogism. Aside from that, your mood could have its different figures depending upon the ayan, no, the arrangement of the middle term in your given categorical syllogism. So the first thing to do is to find out what kind or what type, no, of proposition you have. Is it A, I, O, or U? Okay. Okay, sorry. A, E, I, or O, not U, no? A, E, I, or O. And then for finding out the figures, you check now where is your middle term located. So for figure 1, subject of major premise, predicate of minor premise, that's figure 1. If it's predicate of major premise and subject now of your minor premise, that's figure 4. If your middle term now is both the predicate of your major and minor premises, that's figure 2. And then lastly, if your middle term is the subject now of your major and minor premise, that is now figure 3. So we now have 4 kinds of figures for each mood that you have, no? Okay. Okay, so based on your knowledge now, no, about the moods in figures, we could now categorize the given major minor premises as IAI4 or it's in figure 4. So check natin, no. Figure 4 siya because our subject, okay, nasa yung subject natin, even numbers, and our predicate prime numbers. So yan yung subject and predicate natin. We have the subject here. We have the um, predicate here as prime numbers. Ang middle term natin is counting numbers divisible by 2. So here's your middle term, no? So figure 4 siya. Naging predicate siya ni major premise and naging subject siya ni minor premise. So it's figure 4. So aside from it being in the mood IAI, your figure will denote you, or the arrangement of your middle term now will tell you what figure you have there. So that's IAI dash 4. Okay. Minutes more, I think I could cover, no, lesson 3, and then we could go immediately to lesson 4. So lesson 3 would be a bit very quick because this is just the reduction, no, of the number of terms that you have in your given categorical syllogism. So there are instances that your categorical syllogism may have more terms aside from your given three, no, yung subject, middle term, sorry, your major term, your minor term, and your middle term denoted also, no, by finding out the subject and predicate of your conclusion. So a categorical syllogism may only have three terms. So in the event that a syllogism contained, ayan, no, contained more than three terms, then it is not valid anymore. Also, ayan, hindi mo naman siya directly i-disregard, no, na invalid na yung statement mo by just stating na you have more than three terms. So there are instances wherein you could rewrite, no, your given term so that you'll only have three. Okay, so in our example here, okay, so let's have this example. All bad people are unkind. All considerate people are kind. Therefore, all inconsiderate people are bad people. So just looking at this one, no, you might already assume na this is an invalid na categorical syllogism or a false categorical syllogism because this has more than more than three terms. Specifically, there exists five terms, no, in this categorical syllogism. Ano yon? First, we have considerate people, and then we also have its complement, the inconsiderate people. Nasaan yun? So we have one here. Okay, we have one here and another one here. So one, two. The next one is we have kind people. Ayan, no? And unkind people. So three and 4 unkind people. And finally, you have the last one, which are bad people. So technically, you have 5 terms there. No? So this is not a valid categorical syllogism, as your valid categorical syllogism should only have 3 terms. However, we could rewrite, no, the premise and the conclusion in such a way that we could have only 3 terms. Okay. So ano yung mga important things, no, that we need to take note here? Okay. So the important things that we need to take note here is that sometimes your class have its complement, or what we call as complementary class. So the complementary class is the collection of all things that do not belong to a given class. Okay, for example, when you're writing your categorical syllogism, it's important for you to rewrite it so that it only has 3 terms. So it's important to know that the terms in our categorical syllogisms can be reduced when there are terms in the categorical propositions that are complements of one another, kagaya nung meron tayo earlier. Kind and unkind. Okay, what else? Ano pa? Kind and unkind, considerate and inconsiderate people. Okay, so how are we going to rewrite this given categorical syllogisms? So meron tayong 3 ways on how we're going to rewrite it. For example, conversion, obversion, and contraposition. So starting with conversion, okay, so conversion is done by interchanging the subject and the predicate of your proposition. So when you're converting, you have all SRP as your given statement becomes all SRP. So the proposition all PRS is said to be the converse of all SRP. So you interchange your subject and your predicate. So note that the conversion is valid for all E and I propositions. So this means that any given true E or I proposition, their converses are still true, like this one. Okay, so all S or P is not valid if you have its converse now no, as all P are S. However, ayan, if you have no S or P, it's still valid as no P RS in its converse. Similarly, it's still valid if you have the original statement some SRP rewritten in the form some PRS in its converse would still have a valid na categorical syllogism. However, if it's now in the form some S are not P originally, it's now not valid no if it's written in its converse some P are not S. Okay, so let's go look at the different kinds no of other steps that we could do in ayan, reducing the terms. So we could also still reduce the terms no through obversion. In obversion, it is done by changing the quality of the proposition, so affirmative or negative, no, and replacing the predicate with its complement. So if the quality of this proposition is affirmative, then the quality of its obverse is negative and vice versa. So if the obversion is applied to all SRP, then it becomes no S or none P. Or in your statement, the all SRP is now called the overtend of, and we now have no S or none P is called the obverse. Okay, so when you have all SRP, it's now no S or none P in its obverse form. So note that obverse proposition is valid for all forms of proposition. This means that if a proposition is true, then its obverse is also true. In original and obverse form, we now have all S or P could be rewritten as no S or none P. No S or P could now be rewritten as all S or none P, while some S or P could be rewritten as some S are not non-P, and finally some S are not P could be rewritten in some S are non-P. Okay. Finally, we have the contraposition or getting the contrapositive of our given statement. And this is somewhat familiar to you since we've also done this to the implication. So contraposition now is done by replacing the subject term with the complement of its predicate and replacing the predicate with the complement of its subject. Simply put, contraposition is done by switching the subject and predicate and changing both of them into their complementary classes. Okay, so diba dati, when we get the contrapositive of the proposition, we get its inverse of the converse. So here, contraposition is only valid with A and O proposition. So may mga restrictions tayo for converse and contraposition. No? Okay, so in original form, we now have all S are P could now be rewritten as all non-P are non-S, while some S are not P, itong fourth one natin, which is also valid, could now be still rewritten as some non-P are not non-S. Okay, so it's still valid. However, if your original statement follows the form no SRP or some SRP, if you get its contrapositive, it is not considered valid anymore. Okay, so again, in your provided reference and module, you'll have multiple examples of the conversion of version and getting the contraposition of your given statement. So we'll have a few more minutes and we'll have 5 more minutes, so let me extend no with 5 minutes more to cover what we have for lesson 4. So right now, after going through all of those concepts, no, finding out the term, finding out the subject and predicate, finding out the mood wherein your major, minor, premises, and conclusion will follow, and checking no the figure based on the middle term, we could now find out the validity and falsity of your certain arguments if it's written in a standard form of a categorical syllogism. Okay, so the distribution of terms in your categorical syllogism is important in proving its validity and falsity. So checking now what would be the definition of distribution. So it is now the attribute of a categorical proposition. So it indicates whether or not the categorical proposition makes a statement about every member of the class represented by the given term. Okay. So in checking now, no, sorry. Okay. In checking now the validity and evaluating the validity of your given compound proposition, sorry, not compound proposition, given by your categorical syllogism. Ayan. There are several rules that you need to follow. Okay. So, distribution of terms is very important, no, to know whether your statements are valid or invalid. So basically, there are certain terms, no, that you need to take into account and check whether it's distributed properly or not. Like yung sa A proposition natin, no, some parts or all parts of our subject are part of our predicate. Well, for your E proposition, ayan, sorry about that. No members of one of your subject or your subject are members of your proposition. And then, ayan, that goes for your I and your O proposition naman in terms of being particular about it. No? So like for your I proposition, um, affirming a particular member of your S will be part of your P or your predicate as well, or your O proposition, no, that one member of your S might not be a member of your P, which is your predicate. Okay, so to evaluate your categorical syllogisms, it's important for you to check whether it will be an A, E, I, or O proposition, and then go through the different rules that we have here. Okay, so if it violates, no, any of the rules that we have here, rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay, it is now invalid and you cannot say that that categorical syllogism is valid. So going through the specific rules here, no, rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you will find there that you will either commit a fallacy based on a specific rule. Like for rule 1 states that it must only contain exactly 3 terms. So your categorical syllogism must only contain 3 terms. No? So if it does not contain 3 terms, it might follow, no, a fallacy specifically named as fallacy of 4 terms. And then as you go through the different rules, there are also different fallacies that you might encounter. So if a fallacy is committed on your given categorical proposition or it does not follow any of its rule, okay, we cannot say that your given categorical syllogism is valid. Also, there's another way, no, in finding out the validity of your categorical syllogism, and that is to check what would be the mood and figure of your given categorical syllogism and what would it follow. Okay, so earlier yung example natin, we have the IAI-4 mood and figure, no, of your given categorical syllogism. So I have here, ayan, no, a set of all the moods that you have for your categorical syllogism. Okay, so the mood now contained by the, ayan, no, the different forms that it follows, like AAI-1, okay, is considered as a valid categorical syllogism. So it follows, if it follows the form AAA-1, okay, it's considered valid. It follows the form EAE-1, it's also a valid categorical syllogism. So you could have a copy of this, ano, no, of this table so that you could specifically check once you find out the um, mood and the figure of your categorical syllogism, whether it would be a valid or a false categorical syllogism. Okay, so let me just go through one more example, no, so that you could clearly understand how we're going to go through this one. So our example here, some volunteers are UM students, is our major premise. Our minor premise now, all UM students or senior high school students is given there in our conclusion. Therefore, some senior high school students are volunteers. So we'll now look into the different rules, no, specifically that we have there. Or okay, after checking the rules, I let you go through this on your own, no, since we're short on time. I let you go through the different steps that we have there. Since we have 6 rules, meron din tayong 6 steps, no, to check the validity. If any of those rules are violated, then your given categorical syllogism is considered false, no, or invalid. Okay. Or we could also, ayan, meron tayong step 3, step 4, step 5, and step 6 for all of your rules. Or, ayan, no, na-preempt na natin. Spoiler alert, it's considered valid. Or you could check the mood and figure of your syllogism. And since it follows the form IAI-4 named Demiris, okay, it is now considered as a valid form. So there are certain, no, if you look at this given moods and figures that we have there, notice wala tayong AAA-2, no? Okay, so if it follows the form AAA-2, okay, so it's not considered as a, ayan, valid categorical syllogism. Notice wala tayong, meron ba tayong AEE-1? Okay, parang walang AEE-1. No? So kung wala kang AEE-1, that is again considered as a false categorical syllogism or invalid siya. No? Okay, meron ba tayong EAE-1? Ayan, so meron tayong EAE-1, EAE-2, okay, but we don't have any EAE-3. Okay, wala tayong EAE-3. So again, that is an invalid statement. Okay, so you could check any of these forms, no, to see whether your given categorical syllogism is valid or false, or to check the validity or falsity of your given statement. Hope this discussion and the module I've prepared for you for all of the concepts that we have covered now from week 10 to 12 will help you in your problem set and your long test in the coming weeks. Okay, so do you have any questions? If wala na, I might dismiss you, no, and sorry for the time extension. Okay, but I do hope we could cover everything para ready kayo for your category. Sorry, ready kayo for your problem set and long test. Okay. I know it's a bit overwhelming, but ayan, this will really be helpful for you in answering those assessments that we have. Okay. So kung wala na, again, thank you very much everyone for joining me this afternoon and bye-bye.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po, sir.
Sir,
Please check the
thank you po,
reviewers
sir.
and modules, no, for the same discussions if you would want to study on your own, or you would want again to review based on the discussions that we have for this afternoon. Okay, bye bye.